Welcome to our deep dive, you guys, into Ali Hazelwood's Deep End. You know all those STEMinist romances she's so famous for? The love hypothesis. Love on the brain. Chicken, mate, that's right. This is Ali Hazelwood. This time, though, she's diving into a whole new world. Competitive swimming. And we have our expert here to break it all down with us. What do you say? Ready to go deep on this one?
Oh, absolutely. I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah.
I've always been so fascinated by the way that Hazelwood blends these intellectual settings with passionate romance. So I think this shift to the sports world is really interesting.
It is. This time around, we've got this brilliant but guarded female swimmer. And she's making waves in this totally male-dominated sport. And of course, she gets paired up with a rival who becomes her teammate. Oh, you know the sparks are going to fly in and out of the pool. So I'm dying to know, what themes from the review really stood out to you? I noticed they highlighted women in male-dominated spaces, which makes sense given the whole swimming thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, too, because most of the sports romances that we see tend to focus on football
Huh.
or hockey. So this whole swimming thing feels almost like a metaphor itself.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this protagonist, and she's navigating this world that's constantly trying to push her under.
Hmm.
I can't wait to see how Hazelwood tackles all the specific challenges and triumphs of this particular sport.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical sports romance setting, that's for sure. The review also mentioned the rivalry and forced proximity trope, you know, that push and pull. That makes you just want to root for them to just kiss already. So do you think Hazelwood brings anything new to this trope in Deep End?
That's a great question. You know, I think what could make this one really interesting is how the whole forced proximity in the pool raises the stakes. It's not just working in the same office or bumping into each other at a party. These characters are literally in the same element. They're pushing their physical limits together. I'm curious to see if that kind of heightened intensity,
All right.
translates to a more complex dynamic that we usually see with this trope.
Well, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way. I can already imagine how that shared intensity could lead to some serious emotional depth, especially with Hazelwood's knack for slow burn tension and witty banter. Speaking of depth, the review also mentioned resilience as a major theme. Both characters are facing, personal and professional hurdles. So what resonated with you about that?
Well, what really struck me is how the water acts as this symbol. Throughout the whole story, the review mentioned this, but I think it goes even deeper than that.
Yeah.
Water is both an escape for the characters, it's where they find focus, and they push their limits. But it's also this constant source of challenge. I wonder how Hazelwood uses that duality to reflect the characters' internal struggles and growth.
Oh, I love how you're connecting those dots. It adds a whole other layer to those personal and professional hurdles. You've got the pressure of competition, the demands of the sport, and then all those internal battles that are playing out. But of course, we can't talk Ali Hazelwood without talking about the romance, so the enemies to lovers trope is front and center as always. Does this feel like familiar territory? Or do you see potential for her to go in a new direction?
She's definitely got a winning formula with that trope, but I'm really hoping the swimming backdrop adds something new to it. It's a much more physical, demanding,
Yeah.
arguably vulnerable setting than we've seen before. I'm hoping it forces the characters to confront their emotions and their attraction in a more immediate, raw way.
The review did hint at some potential criticisms, though. Some readers might find the romance predictable, while others might get kind of bogged down by all the technical swimming details. Do you think those criticisms are valid, or is there something more to it?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Hazelwood has a very distinct style. And for some readers, the familiar beats of her romances might feel a little too predictable. But I think what makes this book potentially stand out is the level of detail and authenticity that she brings to the swimming world. If she can balance those technical details with the emotional depth of the characters, it could really elevate the story beyond a typical sports romance.
So maybe all those details aren't just there for background color. They're actually crucial to understanding the characters and what drives them.
Exactly. And for fans of Hazelwood's previous work, I think there's a good chance they'll enjoy this new setting, while still getting those familiar character dynamics and humor that they love.
That is reassuring. But you know what really caught my eye in the review? The mention of a potential adaptation. Can you picture Deep End on the big screen?
Oh, absolutely. The visual potential alone is just incredible. The underwater scenes, the tension of the races, the chemistry between the leads. It could be a truly captivating film or series.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to dive into that thought a little later, though.
You're right, we've covered a lot of ground already. But there's still so much more to explore. For now, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. If Deep End were to be adapted, who would you cast as the leads? We'll be back to dive deeper into the heart of the story soon, so hold on to those casting choices.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm already feeling the chlorine in my hair after that first dive into Deep End.
Right, I can practically hear the splash of the starting gun. Before the break, we were getting pretty hyped about a potential adaptation. I mean,
Seriously.
who wouldn't want to see all that poolside tension play out on screen? But I think it's time to get back to the book itself. I'm really intrigued by this whole idea of the pool as a symbol.
Yeah, it's not just a setting, is it? It's practically a character in itself.
Exactly. The review touched on it, representing both escape and struggle. But I want to go a little deeper. What do you think Hazelwood is trying to convey with this symbolic use of the pool?
Well, it's interesting because water is often associated with fluidity, change, cleansing. But in a competitive setting, it almost becomes claustrophobic. You know, this force that demands complete control and pushes you to your limits. I wonder if for the protagonist, the pool represents a space where she can confront those conflicting forces, the desire to escape and the need to prove herself.
Wow. That's a really insightful observation. It's like the pool is reflecting her internal struggle between vulnerability and strength. That ties back to the women in male-dominated spaces theme. How do you think Hazelwood portrays those specific challenges within this setting?
Well, from what I gather, it's not just about overt sexism or discrimination.
Yeah.
It's the subtle ways that the protagonist is made to feel like she doesn't belong. The dismissive comments, doubts about her abilities, the constant pressure to prove herself. It's something that I think a lot of women can relate to,
Yeah.
regardless of their field.
Yeah. It's that feeling of having to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Does Hazelwood offer any solutions, though? Does the protagonist find support within this male-dominated world?
Well, the review did mention a strong female support system, which I think is promising. It suggests that she's not fighting this battle alone. I'm hoping we see those relationships, with other female athletes,
Yeah.
coaches,
Yeah.
mentors. I hope they play a crucial role in her journey.
Yeah, it's so important to see those examples of female solidarity, especially in a competitive environment that can often feel isolating. But let's not forget this is ultimately a romance novel, so how does this theme of women in male-dominated spaces impact the central relationship?
Oh, that's where things get really interesting. Imagine the tension between a woman fighting for her place in this male-dominated world and a love interest who's part of that world. Does he challenge those norms? Or does he perpetuate them? Does he support her ambitions? Or does he see them as a threat?
It's almost like the romance itself becomes this microcosm of that larger societal struggle. Speaking of the romance, we touched on the enemies to lovers trope earlier, but I want to unpack that a little more. What are some of the ways that Hazelwood could use this setting to add depth to this familiar trope?
Well, think about the inherent vulnerability of swimming. You're literally stripping down to your most basic self, exposed in a way that's not typical in other sports. I think that creates an opportunity for Hazelwood to explore a different kind of intimacy between the characters, one that's built on trust, respect, and a deep understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses.
That makes so much sense. It's like the pool becomes this space where they're forced to see each other in a completely different light, both physically and emotionally. And those technical swimming details that we talked about earlier, maybe they're not just about realism, but about revealing the character's inner workings.
Exactly. Those moments of exertion, those split-second decisions, those tiny adjustments in technique. They could all be used to show us who these characters really are beneath the surface.
It's like those details become a secret language, a way for them to communicate on a deeper level than words can express.
Speaking of language, what about the tone and style of the writing? Is it as witty and engaging as Hazelwood's previous work? For what I've read, she doesn't disappoint. The dialogue is sharp, the banter is playful, and there's this sense of humor that keeps things from getting too heavy, even when she's dealing with serious themes.
That's a relief. Because, let's be honest, we all need a little escapism sometimes. But what's really fascinating to me is how Hazelwood manages to balance that lightheartedness with genuine emotional depth.
It's a delicate balance,
Okay.
but she seemed to pull it off effortlessly. She gives you those swoon-worthy moments,
Mm-hmm.
The heart-fluttering romance. But she also challenges you to think about the bigger picture.
And I think that's what makes her work so addictive. You're not just getting a sweet love story, you're getting a glimpse into the complexities of human relationships and the challenges we all face in finding our place in the world.
Absolutely. It's like she's saying, yes, you can have your happily ever after, but it's not going to be without its struggles, and that's okay.
It's about finding that balance between the personal and the professional, the vulnerability and the strength, the escape and the challenge, just like the pool itself.
I think you've hit on something really profound there. The pool isn't just a setting. It's a reflection of the journey these characters are on. It's where they're tested, where they grow, where they ultimately discover who they are.
And that's what makes me so excited to dive into the final part of Deep End. If Hazelwood can pull all of this off, if she can deliver a satisfying ending that does justice to all these complex themes, well, that's a gold medal in my book.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
As we prepare to enter those final laps, what are you hoping to see in the ending? What kind of resolution do you think would feel most authentic to the themes and characters we've discussed?
That's a great question. And one that I think we need to ponder as we head into the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about the challenges, the symbolism, the heart-fluttering potential. But how does it all come together? Stay tuned because we're about to find out. Welcome back to the show. We are in the final stretch of our Deep End deep dive, and honestly, I'm a little sad to see it end. It's been so fun unpacking Hazelwood's latest book with you.
I agree. It's always bittersweet to finish a good book, you know? But I guess the ending is the most important part. That's where all the threads come together. And we see if Hazelwood sticks the landing.
You're so right. And I have to say, without giving away any spoilers, she does a fantastic job. A fantastic job of delivering a conclusion that feels both satisfying and thought-provoking. We talked about how the pool is the space where the characters face their challenges and grow. Do you think that continues to hold true in the final act of the story?
Absolutely. Remember how we were discussing the pool as a symbol of vulnerability and strength? I think the ending brings that full circle. It's where we see the characters confront their deepest fears and insecurities, not just in the water, but in their relationships as well.
That makes sense. It's like the climax of the story isn't just about winning a race. It's about winning over those internal demons that have been holding them back. What about the romance, though? Does Hazelwood deliver the payoff we've been waiting for with this whole enemies to lovers dynamic?
She does. And in a way that feels both earned and authentic to the characters. Remember how we talked about the need for the romance to reflect the challenges of a woman in a male-dominated space? Well, Hazelwood doesn't shy away from exploring that tension. It's not a perfect fairy tale ending, but one that feels grounded in reality and acknowledges the complexities of navigating love and ambition in a world that doesn't always play fairy.
So it's not just about the characters falling into each other's arms. It's about them figuring out how to support each other's dreams and aspirations.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between individual growth and shared passion. And I think that's what makes this ending so satisfying. It's not just about romantic fulfillment, it's about personal fulfillment too.
It sounds like Hazelwood really delivers on the promise of this book. The sports rivalry, the slow burn romance, the exploration of complex themes. I'm curious, though, what did you personally take away from Deep End? Was there a particular moment or theme that resonated with you?
You know, for me, it was the protagonist's journey of finding her voice. Remember how we discussed those subtle ways women are often made to feel like they don't belong? It was inspiring to see her overcome those doubts and stand up for herself, both in the pool and in her personal life. It's a reminder that we all have the power to challenge those norms and create a world where everyone feels seen and heard.
That's beautifully said. It makes me think about how Deep End might inspire readers in their own lives. Maybe it's about pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, or finding your tribe of supportive women, or speaking up for what you believe in. Would you recommend this book to listeners?
Absolutely. I think anyone who enjoys a good romance with substance will love this book. Anyone who's ever felt like an underdog, or anyone who's passionate about seeing strong women represented in fiction.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to resurface from our deep dive. It's been such a pleasure exploring the depths of this book with you. But before we say goodbye, I want to leave you with one final thought. Think about the pool as a metaphor in your own life. What challenges are you facing? Where do you find escape? And how can you use those experiences to emerge stronger and more resilient on the other side?
That's a powerful image to hold on to.
Yeah.
Remember, even when you're in the deep end, there's always a way to find your stroke and reach the surface.
And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire someone else to dive in alongside you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Deep End. Until next time, happy reading.